All right, everyone, welcome back to On the Fringe with Gavin and me, Dave. So, we're going to be coming at you today from a part of the world that a lot of people are starting to talk about, but it's still pretty off the radar. We're going to be talking about the Golden Triangle and a lot of organized crime in Southeast Asia. Now, if you take organized crime in Southeast Asia, a lot of it goes back to the Golden Triangle, either through the drug trade, human trafficking trade, or money laundering. Also, you've got weapons trafficking, you've got some other things going on too that are pretty nefarious. And Gavin's got a smile on his face, so we're gonna let Gavin jump right in. Okay, Gavin, what would you like to add to this conversation?
So let's just start off with a little acronym fun. So TC is transnational crime, TOC is transnational organized crime. I did a little sparse research over the last couple of minutes, and I've sort of been reading about it all week. This is something that's not totally alien to me. Um, but yeah, everything you just said. Absolutely. I think this week I'd like to sort of touch on the origins of why this is becoming a thing now, because there's some
Hmm.
interesting geopolitical reasons that really have more to do with domestic politics in the People's Republic of China than anything else. Um, and also, the, I mean, we got to talk about where's Alice Guo.
Yeah.
We got
And
to
we've got to talk about Zhao Wei as well.
We're just going to spend a lot of time talking about Jiao Wei. So let's just start off with what is the Golden Triangle? The Golden Triangle is a ambiguously defined geographical region in the north of Southeast Asia, roughly where Thailand, Laos, and Burma meet up together. Also, in the far north, of course, you have Southwest China, which in this case is Yunnan province. So
Hmm.
you have this region basically encompassing like Shan State and Karen State and Burma, the far north of Thailand, north of Chiang Rai, basically. And I would actually say pretty much all of North and Western Laos.
Hmm.
So it's a fairly large geographical area. And you hit the nail on the head with something that we're going to come back to throughout this, which is these groups don't do one thing. None of the groups operating in the Golden Triangle, whether it's the Law State Army or the Jiao Wei group, none of these guys are doing one thing. They're involved in multiple enterprises, some of which are not obviously criminal, and many of which are. So, yeah, we're
And for
talking.
example, as a non-criminal enterprise, Zhao Wei is saying he's planted 40,000 trees in Laos. 40,000 trees.
Let the
So they're saying we're
flowers
doing a little
bloom.
bit of
Let the
development
flowers
here as
bloom,
well. We're
man.
improving the environment. So it's not all bad. It's not all bad.
Hey, he did a lot of good things for charity. But yeah, no, this is the historical origins of this go really far back, though. If you look at the region that we now call the Golden Triangle, this has historically been a fairly lightly governed part of the world. Local communities, uh, I mean, first of all, I guess an obvious thing to say is it is an ethnic patchwork almost beyond imagination, rivaling anything in the Balkans or even Papua New Guinea. If you
Yeah.
get up to this part of Southeast Asia, there are so many different languages and ethnic groups, it kind of boggles the mind. Um, and they're all some degree of harmony, some degree of conflict. But the long and short of it is there has not been a strong state presence in this part of the world. Either on the Chinese side, Yunnan province was always sort of a byword for lawlessness.
Mhm.
Northern Myanmar was basically a separate country to the rest of Myanmar, and certainly since they got independence, it's been governed that way. Again, northern Thailand, very similar. Laos has just kind of been lightly governed, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So it's not a territory that has historically had a strong state presence. And I guess, and I'll just let you take over. The most recent history that sort of sets all of this up is the Cold War. So during
Hmm.
the Cold War, right at the end of the Chinese Civil War, as the last remaining officials of the Republic of China left, and basically escaping the PRC, uh, obviously most of them wound up in Taiwan. That's where most of them went. A lot of them, specifically ROC soldiers, wound up in the Golden Triangle as a stay behind force. And the idea was these troops were going to basically build up a military force and continue to harass PRC soldiers, or in the dreams of some of them, I'm sure, were eventually going to lead back some victorious army into Southwest China and collapse the regime. That never happened. The problem is they got stuck. So you now have, I think the low estimate is maybe like 10,000, around 10, 15,000 Chinese soldiers in this part of the world who are unemployed. And basically, what do they know how to do? Well, smuggling, arms procurement, and violence. So this is the core of a lot of the armed groups in the Golden Triangle. And very quickly, they took charge of the heroin trade, which
Well, I was going to jump in real quick and say heroin primarily came from this region of the world for a very long time. And then during the Vietnam War, you had soldiers like Frank Lucas who took advantage of Americans that either were back in the States that were wanting to buy this, and he took advantage of the U.S. military infrastructure in place going between the States and Southeast Asia to smuggle drugs back to the United States. So these guys are enterprising. They're looking at it like, we don't care. We need money. We need a source of income. And we'll pretty much sell whoever to whoever and whatever we got. So if you want to buy drugs, okay, we'll start farming up drugs and we'll sell these to you. And basically, it doesn't matter to us as long as we're getting money and we're enriching ourselves and we're building our power base. That's really what we're interested in. So you have that kind of the war on drugs then starts from the 70s, 80s, and these guys just continue to get more and more money. And then over the last 10 to 15 years, you have other countries like North Korea and Iran and Russia that are getting sanctioned. They need to get money. And basically, these guys have organizations and criminal organizations. So they're basically going to use whatever they can to get around sanctions. And they can work with some of these countries, or they can work with some of these criminal groups to essentially move money, move weapons, move people, and get around sanctions in place set by the United States or set by other Western countries.
there have also been two really big developments that I think have changed things, and then we'll get to China in a second. You probably know more about that than I do. But one of them is the fact that, yes, historically, the Golden Triangle was the center of heroin production in the world in terms of just farming and exportation. That shifted around the 2000s because of the Taliban presence in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, I think, still something like 90% of the world's heroin is coming from there. So
Yep.
that shifted the focus a little bit. And what it led to was diversification in terms of now they're dealing with mining. So they're smuggling jade and gold. They're starting to produce, or they have been producing massive amounts of methamphetamines.
Yeah. And ice is the biggest drug, I would say, coming, or one of the biggest, at least in terms of profit margins.
Yeah, because
And you have it going all the way through Thailand, where yaba is what they call it. And it's a huge problem in rural Thailand. And the Thais don't really want to talk about it, but yaba is something that is definitely on the Thai government's radar. And it's a scourge.
so we've got that. We also have major online gambling, a major rise in scam farms, which we'll return to in a second,
Hmm.
uh, sex trafficking, human trafficking, also illegal wildlife trafficking, which is a massive thing as well. So there's
Yep.
all of this stuff. Basically, weapons trafficking. There's a lot of weapons trafficking. If it's illegal, it's being sold in this part of the world. It's an open market. If you want it, you can get it. Now, what's upset the apple cart in the last 3 years, definitely, actually, no, goes back a little further than that, is the war in Myanmar. Because particularly northern Myanmar along the Chinese border, used to be the center for most of this illicit commercial activity. And that has had to shift over the last couple of years because it's now an active war zone. This is just not something that's possible anymore. Also, the Chinese government, and we're going to talk about this in relation to Mr. Zhao Wei, the Chinese government is now actively coordinating with foreign governments to crack down on transnational organized crime that is being run by Chinese nationals, or at least people who used to be Chinese nationals.
Hmm.
So this is a relatively recent development, but I think a fairly dramatic one in some ways.
Yeah. Well, this crackdown kind of started, I think it was in 2011 when there were, I think it was 15 or 16 Chinese people on a boat that were killed by local warlords. And the Chinese government, from what I remember, made a huge deal about we're extraditing the leader of this group of warlords to China. They had a big, huge show trial, and they basically showed him, okay, we're carrying him off to the execution chamber. And the Chinese government was like, we're not going to let our citizens be taken advantage of or be killed by these gangsters. And we're going to keep this region stable and safe for Chinese investment. And we're going to protect our people. So essentially, the Chinese government is looking at this and going, this is bad for business. If we have these guys running around in Southeast Asia and their governments can't control them, we're going to step in and we're going to do what we have to do to protect our investments and protect our money, so to speak.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this is maybe the inner history teacher in me coming out, but in the back of my mind, I always think about the mandate of heaven. And
Hmm.
this is an important thing if you're a Chinese government. You not only have to prove that you're capable of enforcing stability at all times, you have to ensure a degree of safety for your citizens. There's a real sense of a social contract. And the fact that it isn't really, I'm sorry, understatement of the century was coming up there. It isn't a democratic system. So therefore, there's there's actually a lot of worrying about discontent because there's no real natural way for that to be expressed. There's a worry about what if people really focus on this one particular issue. And yeah, and the Golden Triangle has been a very persistent issue for the Chinese government and
Hmm.
continues. So, Zhao Wei.
The casino that he knows, and also in North, and I believe King Romans or King something like that. I don't have the name in front of me.
Yeah.
30, 30 acre that he leased Russian government for 90 years.
Mm.
And being on the Laos side of Thailand basically means take advantage of Laos's weak warlord and say, okay, I'm the main player, and similar to what he did in Myanmar and similar to what he did in basically set up virtually any business, and whether it's whether it's money laundering, whether it's drug trafficking, weapons, or construction, doesn't what it is out there just trying to make money
Yeah.
and build power throughout his power base. So the Chinese government is looking at this and going, potentially, and I could be wrong, this guy is a very, very powerful figure. Why do we want to deal with this guy in China? Why don't we let this guy set up his little empire in Laos and we're just going to let him do his thing? And as long as he's not bothering Chinese people and he's people in Laos, okay, Zhao Wei, go do whatever you want. You want to mess with the foreigners, if you want to launder money, as long as you're not making China look really, really bad, we don't care. But I think this is coming to a head now where it's starting to get out of control and he's getting too powerful, where they're like, okay, we've got to start pulling back on these reins a little bit because this guy is getting too big.
I mean, also part of the issue with that is, particularly with the scam farms, and this is kind of going to be the through line here. Most of the scam farms that are being run in that part of the world, they're targeting people globally, but they're targeting people in China.
Mhm.
So they essentially accidentally exported the thing that they were trying to contain. Because the big issue they were having with guys like Zhao Wei domestically was that they were like scamming old people, they were conning pensioners out of their retirement, that kind of thing. This looks really bad. So they say, okay, go, don't make us look bad. And he committed the cardinal sin of continuing to make them look bad, and not giving much of a hoot. And I think probably also overestimating the amount of protection the Laotian government could provide, uh, which I think is probably what he's dealing with now, which is the realization that, yeah, they're not going to do very much, but they're also not going to stop the Chinese from doing things.
Mhm.
So, but I think I could be wrong. I think he started his career in Macau. Which,
Yes, he was in Macau. He's
yeah,
from Heilongjiang, so the very, very northeastern part of China. He's a Dongbei boy.
there were a lot of people from Dongbei who like I think it is a stereotype inside China. I don't know if I buy into it, but there is sort of a grifting culture associated with that part of the country. And I
Hmm.
think it's has something to do with it being way up north, a little bit of a frontier, a little bit of a post-industrial wasteland where people kind of have to fend for themselves. And
Think
yeah,
Cleveland, but 15 times worse.
it's a good way of describing it. Yeah. We love you, Cleveland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never.
Fun times in Cleveland again, in Cleveland.
I was going to say something really insulting about Chile, and then I realized it was Cincinnati. Um, Never been to Ohio. That's my excuse. Sorry, big fan of the Buckeye State. I think that's what they're called. Uh, Never been to Ohio, so that's my excuse. Sorry, Cleveland. You
And it
just
is a four-letter word.
I oh, I know that. Yeah, I know that.
And it's not
I,
Idaho. Sorry, we're
I
not
feel like,
Ohio.
yeah, Ohio is the Idaho of this generation. Anyways, sorry, Dave.
We're
Uh,
back. Maybe we're back.
Maybe we're back. So, uh, Zhao Wei is in deep, deep trouble in the hold on, let me just read off the Treasury, the Zhao Wei Transnational Criminal Organization, or
So this was
TCO.
back in 2018, I think, is when we first put sanctions on him, if I can
Yeah, this
remember
is
correctly.
January 30th, 2018. So this is a
Yeah.
while ago already. Uh, the official name for this special region, and it's basically like a free city in the middle of nowhere. And the official name is the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone. Now, I don't know how far off we want to go into talking about special economic zones, but boy, can you have a grand old time in a
Oh boy.
SEZ. So the SEZs, I think the original one would have been What's the name of the
You had
town?
Shenzhen, you had Zhuhai, you had Pudong, and
Yeah.
then Xiamen, I believe, were the first four. And Shenzhen was the main big one that blew up right across from Hong Kong. So it's today where most of the electronics companies and like China's Google, Baidu, and Tencent are all from around that area. So Guangdong and Shenzhen is their main tech hub, just across from Hong Kong.
And this has been replicated, or people have attempted to replicate this all over the planet because it was really successful in China. Um, in just in an incredibly dramatic way. I mean, I think my dad was in Shenzhen in 1978, and his main memory of it was rice fields and duck farms. Today, it's one of the biggest metropolitan areas in the world. It's like 20 million people. And it is, yes, it's just the economic engine of southern China. So that has been a massive success. Of course, if you're unable to enforce laws, which the Chinese government historically has never had any issues with, the SEZs can become very messy very quickly because
Mhm.
it's basically the Wild West. And
Yeah.
that is 100% what has happened in Laos.
Yep. And in Cambodia as well. So you have the SEZ in Sihanoukville, and that's pretty much become the Wild West. This could be a whole nother episode, but
Right.
mid
Well,
last decade, Sihanoukville is a huge city now in Cambodia. It was a small seaside town. It's been built up primarily with Chinese money and Chinese investment and infrastructure. And it was kind of one of the first hubs of scam farms and of these human trafficking rings where they set up a lot of these online casinos and a lot of these scam centers where they would just start baiting people. They would primarily get people from Southeast Asia or from within Cambodia to come to these places. They'd offer them a job of, oh, you're going to work at a hotel, or you're going to be some sort of admin assistant, or you're going to be some sort of low level white collar job, and we're going to pay you anywhere from 600 up to 1,200 bucks, which is huge money. If you're in Indonesia, that's maybe 2 or 3 times your monthly salary. So people are willing to take it, and there's no real vetting for these jobs. They're just posting them on Facebook or posting them online. The people go up there, and then once they're there, they take their passport and like, okay, you've got to pay us back all the debt, plus your plane ticket, plus everything else for you to be here. So they basically take them, they hold them hostage, and they force them to work as a scammer. And you'd sometimes get the local police to come in and bust these things, and it was more of a show because you're basically playing whack-a-mole. And it's similar in Laos, similar in Myanmar, where the local police, in India too, where the local police will come in, they'll shut one of these down, and then you'll have three more sprout up. And it's very, very hard to actually get rid of these things if you're the local police because there's so much corruption within these countries.
and I just want to focus on two points. One of which is, so scam firms are absolutely. I mean, first of all, scam firms are global; they're all over the place. Uh, there's definitely concentrations, and one of the big ones outside of Southeast Asia is India. But one of the criminal innovations that's happened in these Southeast Asian scam farms is they realized you didn't have to pay these people, um, which they kind of still do in India. I mean, the interesting thing about the Indian scam firm economy is they look like and are operated by the same people working in call centers. There's
Mhm.
almost no difference except in the legality of the work. Uh, the infrastructure, the owners, the equipment, the people working in them, there are very few differences. Uh, in Southeast Asia, as we've just heard, yeah, you're basically in a slave type situation. This is pretty dire in a lot of ways. Uh, and also, they've expanded the net. So they were looking initially for people locally, really in Southeast Asian countries. They expanded. There was a big problem with Taiwanese people being lured abroad. That prompted, again, sort of a wave of show crackdowns. Now they're targeting people as far away as Kenya and Tanzania. And increasingly, you have people from East Africa being targeted. You have almost weekly in India stories about Indian software engineers being kidnapped somewhere in Myanmar, somewhere in Cambodia. So this is just an escalating thing. And we'll get right back to it. You hit the nail on the head. Ironically, this whole thing is one giant game of whack-a-mole. The opportunity is created. These groups move in to fill that opportunity or to take advantage of it. Law enforcement belatedly catches up with them. They move on to something else. And these groups are very hard to eliminate. They're very fluid. They're made up of a lot of moving parts, and they're incredibly diversified. Scam farms, for a lot of them, are bringing in significant revenue. I mean, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. These people are literally clawing in hundreds of millions a year. But they also have human trafficking. They also have drug smuggling. They also have weapons procurement. They have the illegal wildlife trade. They even have a legal timber trade. So it's just a massive, massive business. And, despite the fact that it looks like a crackdown is coming up, again, I think at the end of the day, we're just going to see more whack-a-mole.
Well, I agree. And I was just looking when you were talking, AARP said Americans lost $8.8 billion to scams in 2022. And some of these scams are getting more diversified. One of the biggest scams today is called a pig butchering scam. And primarily what people will do, and this originated in China, and it comes from Chinese phrase, basically to take a pig, feed it, and then whack it and kill it when it gets fat. So people will set up a fake online profile of somebody either that's really poor or somebody that's starting a business or somebody that has some sort of, thing that they're working on, and then they'll get to build trust with, and they'll do this for a couple of months, maybe longer, build trust, and then this person will have some sort of a problem. And then they'll go, I really need help solve the problem. I need $50. Or they might say something like, I've made money over the last couple of months through trading and foreign exchange or through cryptocurrency. And since we're friends, I want to help you take advantage of this deal as well. So download this app right here. And basically the scammer's enterprise controls this app. So they'll send photos to this person that they're talking to every day and show them, look, my account, look how much I made. I told you you should have joined this yesterday, to try to entice them to do it. And then as soon as they download it, then they'll have them put money into the account. And then the scammer, once they realize they've got them on the hook, they'll get them to continue just feeding and feeding and feeding into this account. And then when they think they've got enough money from this person, this person's not going to contribute, they're going to cut and run, and all of your money is gone. They might show you, oh yeah, you won, you earned maybe 15 to 20%, but they're going to do that just to get you to put more money in. So the whole entire scam around it is people are just out there trying to take your money. And something I think a lot of us in the US, we're very, very kind and we're very generous people. And if there's an earthquake, or any sort of major event that's going on, you've got war in Ukraine, war in Gaza, people are going to want to donate money to do something to help. And scam groups can easily make a front and go, we're going to set up a page, or we're going to set up some sort of organization to have you, the American people, help these people wherever they are for whatever reason. And they set this up, they go around and say, oh, I am working for the Red Crescent, or I'm working for the Red Cross. Now, I've actually had this happen to me where a lady sent me a message and said, hey, I'm working for the Red Crescent. We're looking for donations. And I looked and I did a bit of digging and I was like, I don't even think this person is real. This is 100% either a bot or it's somebody that basically took a picture of someone online. They made a fake profile and they're out there just fishing for people. And if somebody does this, or you want to make a contribution, I guess the point of this, my whole thing is do research before you actually give money to someone, and use your common sense. Don't give your money to people that you don't really know. Even if you don't know people, I'd be like, Gavin, I need $50. Please, Gavin, give me some money. And I know he's right now looking at me like, Dave, shut up. And you can go, I don't know, rob some kid and get $50. Probably wouldn't be a good idea. Or go drive your car and do a couple of Uber runs and make $50 if you really need that $50. So just be careful, because these scams are going to get worse.
Yes.
And with AI and with voice technology coming out over the last couple of years, where now there are scams coming out where somebody will say, oh, I am this person, and they'll be able to mimic your voice. Just be very, very careful of what you hear on the phone or what you see on your screen, because these organizations and these criminal enterprises are getting much better. They're getting more investment, and they're getting more sophisticated.
Yeah, and just
Kind of long-winded.
a lot of this sounds very basic, but people, don't download apps you don't know. Just don't do it. If you don't know what an application is, don't have it on your phone. Because next thing you know, there's some guy in a factory in Laos and you don't have any money. Maybe you'd like
And
to.
he doesn't have any money either. His boss
He
has
doesn't
all
have
the money.
money either. He's having a worse day than you are. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
But yeah, use common sense. Don't download things you don't know. If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So yeah.
Yep.
Do we want to leave with like a 5 minute encapsulation of the Alice Guo hoo-ha?
Yeah, we can. I was going to say one more thing. So this is something that should have been mainstream news, but it wasn't. But in the last week, let me pull that up. I put it on my notes. So there was a company called National Public Data that was based in Florida. They do criminal background checks, and they got hacked a few months ago. There was no word about this, and they had 2.9 billion accounts that were hacked. So 2.9 billion accounts were hacked, and the
Whoa.
whole entire mess of information was for sale for $3.5 million. So a tiny amount of money. And they're selling it for a low price because they want all of these different criminal organizations and these bad people and nefarious actors to have access to it. So probably in the next 6 months to a year, as technology gets better, as these criminals get better, they're going to be out probably fishing and looking for people. So be smart. Don't be clicking on those links in your emails about, oh, I can get, $50 from this job, or download this survey right now and we'll pay you $25 and we'll give you a gift card to your favorite restaurant. Just be very careful. Check all of the information about who it's coming from and spelling of your name, and look for grammatical mistakes, because these guys are going to be fishing for information. And the more information that you put out there, the easier you are as a target. And if you're an easier target, you've got to have better defenses. They're going to go for
I have
the
to change
weakest
my
person that they think they
password
can.
on Yahoo again.
Hmm?
Gee whiz, Dave, I guess I have to change my password on Yahoo again.
Oh, no.
No.
Gavin Lucky, GM Lucky 1. It's going to be GM Lucky 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3. Add two more numbers. It'll make it like 30%
Like, you're
harder for the
getting
computer, but it'll
close.
figure it out in like half a millisecond.
Close. I'm really going to have to switch it up. Might have
Yeah.
to count down backwards. Anyways,
Well, let's jump in real quick. Alice.
Alice. Where's Alice?
Alice is running around off to Wonderland somewhere. But
So,
more than likely, she's going to the Golden Triangle.
uh, we'll see. I have a feeling she may. I just hope she resurfaces in one piece. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like she has embarrassed some people you probably don't want to embarrass.
Yeah,
So,
especially in the Philippines.
oh, especially in the film, I would never go back if I was her.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't either.
there was this very odd scandal that's kind of erupted over the last year, where basically there was a mayor in the northern Philippines, and this was the real mistake that she made. There was a mayor in the northern Philippines who had a very high social media profile, was sort of known for being like very generous to the people in her city. and was pretty, it seems like fairly universally loved in the city itself. The issue was she wasn't a Filipino national. Um, or at least when they found the birth certificate, man, there were some major problems. She was registered as being born like 8 years after she said she was. Uh, she couldn't provide an answer as to who her parents were. Then,
Or school.
or her school. Things snowballed, and then she came up with this whole bizarre story about being raised on a pig farm in the middle of nowhere, which is why she had no documentation and she didn't know anyone's name. And there was no record of her existing at all.
But she speaks really good English.
She speaks fantastic English and, of course, wonderful Mandarin. Uh, very, very, from all accounts, very charming lady. Um, who had a lot of money. Now, in the Philippines, where people are getting their money from is sometimes an opaque matter, as it is in many parts of the world. Uh, but this was someone who had no obvious means of financial success and was doing extraordinarily well. So things snowball, things snowball. Eventually, the Filipino police raid a compound in this city and find uh, basically this giant walled compound with a drum roll, please. What do you think they had on the compound? Yeah, they had a scam farm. So there was a giant scam farm. There was like a room full of expensive smuggled in liquor. There was just all kinds of, as Dave said, evidence of nefarious actions going on. And while this was going on, she was supposed to be on her way to basically, I think it was a Senate hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And she skipped town. And Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who's very pissed off about all of this, is trying to figure out how the hell this woman got out of the Philippines when there was essentially, she was in the top 10 most wanted, her pictures everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There was a
And
freeze
she's
on
been
her
everywhere
passport.
too. I mean, they had her in front of the actual Philippine Senate
Yeah.
where she was answering questions. So she's a very, very public figure. She's been a very public figure for the last few months. And she got out. So she ended up going to Malaysia and then I think to Singapore and then Indonesia. And then she's in Indonesia from what I understand. And her brother, I think, or somebody, one of her relatives was trying to leave Indonesia as well. And I don't know if he was not allowed out or they followed him, but basically there's no extradition warrant out for her. So there's no Interpol red notice. So basically there's nothing. And not that an Interpol red notice can really do anything, just more about like, hey, this guy is somebody you really should keep your eyes on.
Well, there's also
So
another
she's
thing.
trying to run away and go somewhere.
Another thing I would think about, Dave, is how would they put an Interpol red notice out on someone whose identity isn't even sure?
I know, right?
I mean, who knows what document she's actually traveling under?
Yep.
Needless to say, this whole thing has been a massive embarrassment to the Filipino government at a fairly sensitive time. And yeah.
We're
Anyway,
gonna leave it at that because we're about out of time.
we're almost out of
Seriously, we're
time,
about out of
Dave.
time.
I'll see you next week, man. I'll
All
see you
right.
next week, and we'll
Thanks
stay
for tuning in
on the fringe.
on the fringe. And we're off the fringe.